You're listening to the Travis Makes Money podcast presented by GoHighLevel.com. For a free 30-day trial of the best all-in-one digital marketing software tool on the planet, just go to GoHighLevel.com/Travis. Hey, what's going on, money makers? Welcome back to the Travis Makes Money podcast, where it's our mission to help you make more money. If you're new to the show, we release brand new conversations with unconventional money makers every single day of the week. You might be listening to this on another feed or something like that right now. So if you have not yet, please be sure to go over to your podcast app of choice right now and follow the show, subscribe there, so you never miss an opportunity to make some more money. And while you're there, if you want to leave us a rating review, I wouldn't fault you for that. I would be eternally grateful, as it really does help us out with the show tremendously. Today on the show, I'm super excited to be talking to the one and only Chris Miles. Chris is the cash flow expert and anti-financial advisor. He's a leading authority teaching entrepreneurs and professionals how to get their money working for them today. He's an author, podcast host of the Money Ripples podcast, has been featured in US News, CNN Money, Entrepreneurs on Fire, BiggerPockets, and has a proven reputation with his company, Money Ripples, getting his clients fast financial results. In fact, his personal clients have increased their cash flow by over $300 million in the last 15 years. So if there's anybody that I could bring on the show to talk about making more money and managing that money, it's Chris Miles. So without further ado, Chris, what's up, dude? Welcome to the show.
Hey, happy to be here, Travis. I love it that you got your money makers on the show. I got my money ripplers. So we're gonna combine forces like Voltron here and make
that's right. Make it and then make it ripple. That's right. Yeah,
that's right.
Well, talk to me about how you made your first dollar ever, Chris, and then we'll get into how you make money now.
I can't remember if I made my first dollar ever by losing a tooth. Although that's not something that's really duplicatable after a while,
Yeah. You only have a few shots at that one. Yeah,
that's right. You got limited amounts of quarters you can get from that sucker, but, no, I think the very first thing, my first failed business was trying to do a nutraceutical business. I was going to make this fancy like protein shake, that my mom sold Herbalife back in the 80s. Didn't even realize it was network marketing back then.
Yeah.
And, I was going to combine Tang with it and a whole bunch of other stuff. And I was trying to charge by the calorie versus charging for the real value. So it was like $16 for a cup of it. Nobody bought it. So I didn't make money there, but I finally did make money actually, doing like how schools do like their little sales thing.
Yeah.
We did like a little sales of like, I think it was like pepperoni sticks or something like that. And I made some bonus from that, like I was the most introverted kid ever, but I don't know what it was. I could go knock door to door because if it was about winning a prize or something or making a little extra money, I was all about it,
You know what's funny about that, dude, is I was kind of the same way. Like people think that I'm not an introvert because my show used to be called Build Your Network. It was very much about like networking and how to get out and build relationships with people. But I am much more of an introvert than people realize. But for whatever reason, that was kind of the same way for me. I did 5 years of door to door before I started the podcast. For whatever reason, like if there was, I think it was just there was the incentive of money. I think the money at the end of the tunnel, you know what I mean, was like, I think it's worth like going and knocking on these doors and putting myself in this uncomfortable position because that paycheck is pretty solid,
Yeah, that's true. Like for me, I think almost for me it was the recognition even more than the money too, right? Because it was like, what can you do to get recognized and feel like, oh, look, the invisible kid is now visible because he did something cool. I think now looking back, I wonder if that was my biggest incentive right there, was just trying to be visible.
Yeah, that's a fair point. You do get the recognition like pretty quickly, and especially in those types of incentive based programs or like any sort of company that has some sort of high volume sales potential. They do a good job at like, you get your name on the email blast the next morning of like, right. This person crushed it on the doors yesterday or whatever, and I was like, yeah, that's me.
Exactly. Yeah,
because like
school
wise,
school was not incentivized. I was like above average in school. I was above average in sports, but I never excelled in any one thing specifically, which pretty much is where you're kind of good at a lot of stuff, but not really excellent at everything. That's what usually makes you a good CEO, right?
Sure. Yeah, very true. So tell me how you made your most recent dollar, Chris. What do you do now?
Yeah, most recent dollar is actually just through our company. I think the most recent one was today. We had our monthly renewals for our members, for our clients, the ones that hired us initially with a tuition to be our VIP clients, but then they have a month-to-month agreement. They can stay as a retainer on the back end, and now about 90% of them do. And so yeah, we just barely had our, monthly charge go through to have, a bunch of our clients renew and keep with us month to month.
Yeah. So tell me more about what that business does specifically.
Yeah, so we got two arms of our business, but ultimately our whole purpose is how do we get people to create more cash flow, more passive income today? You talk about making money now, right? Where the biggest problem I see in like financial advising is because I used to be a financial advisor over 20 years ago, and the biggest problem is it's always about future planning, right? Your retirement or whatnot, but there's never like present day planning. And so we focus on the here and now, right? Like your business has got to be your economic engine. But then as you become profitable in your business, where does that money go to create multiple streams of passive income that doesn't detract you from your business, but actually allows you to be able to make more money in other places? And so like these VIP clients, these are people that paid us money to really kind of have an anti-financial advisor on their team, someone who's not going to sell them mutual funds and the traditional crap that every broke financial advisor teaches you, but instead, like how to do what I actually did myself, which was, after I quit being a financial advisor, I went to real estate investing. And when I was 28 years old, I was able to retire. I had enough passive income where I didn't have to keep working anymore. And I've been teaching people to really do just that. Is how do you take your money and get your money to start working harder for you? Do you stop working so hard for that dang money?
Yeah. So specifically through cash flowing vehicles as well, not just like things that are going to be more valuable in the future, but something that can actually pay you
Yeah.
money as soon as you secure that asset.
Exactly. I mean, that was one of the biggest ahas I had, when I was breaking away from the financial advisor mindset, because I was always that accumulation mindset, right? You accumulate, you store up money like you're the squirrel saving up for winter of retirement, and then hopefully you have enough nuts to not, to basically not starve during that winter because you live too long, right? And I was teaching that, and it became apparent for me because my dad specifically, we were just talking about him before he went on the air. He was 61 years old. He says, "Chris, when are you going to advise me?" Now, this guy had had other financial advisors. This guy was doing everything by the book. I mean, he was stuffing money in his 401k, getting the company match. He paid off all of his debt, including his mortgage, in just 18 years. So this guy was 100% debt free, stuffing money in his 401k. This guy was like Dave Ramsey's wet dream come true, right?
Yeah. No kidding.
And so, like, I sit down with him, I look at his numbers. I'm pretty excited to see what he's done. And he says, "Chris, I'm 61 years old. I got to retire at some point. Like, what do I do?" And I look at all his numbers. I say, "Dad, if you want to retire today, you're going to have to die in about 5 or 6 years because that's when you'll run out of money.
Wow.
You've been saving for 40 freaking years and all these things that Dave Ramsey and everybody else has been recommending, but yet you only got maybe 5 or 6 years of life from this money."
Can,
And
can,
so
can
he had to
you,
work into his 70s to be able to be where he is now. He's 80 years old and barely stretching out his dollars, you know?
can you expound on that? Like, how is that a possibility? Why did that happen?
Yeah, it's really easy. Everything that I learned as a financial advisor was all about overpromise and underdeliver, right? And it's always based on assumptions. It's like, like I have a tweet from Dave Ramsey that says, if you just save $100 a month for 40 years after earning 12% a year, you'll have $1.176 million, right? Everybody should retire, a millionaire, that kind of thing, right? Like I have that little tweet that I saved, or X. I don't know if you call them now, if they still call them tweets. But
Yeah.
anyways, so he had that, and I actually looked at the numbers, and one, I realized that Dave Ramsey actually miscalculated. $100 a month for 40 years at 12% is not 1.176 million. It's 200,000 less. So he couldn't even do the math right.
Oh, wow.
Two, the stock market's never averaged long-term 12%,
Yeah.
ever. It's like even the last 30 years, it's been about 8.7%, maybe a little bit under right now.
Mm,
And that's one of the best runs we've seen in a long time. So when you factor those things in, the roaring 90s and then the roaring 2010s and into the 20s, right? You're like, man, like is my best I can hope for is maybe 8%, 9%. You do the numbers again, now you're instead of having 1.176 million, you're down to like 400,000 bucks.
right.
But then you're like, oh, but inflation is actually higher than what the government tells us it is. And you look at real rates of inflation, you're like, oh, that 400,000 really in 40 years is going to feel more like 60,000 bucks.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
just saved $100 a month and then you have $60,000, live on 3%, that's $1,800 a year. You're like, oh, well, that's living on like $150 a month. And they pay
Right.
taxes. So you might walk away with $100 a month. This is the problem. Whatever you save in these crappy mutual funds that are high risk, mediocre returns, after inflation and everything's factored in, whatever you save per year is about what you can live on per year.
Mm,
And that's what was happening with my dad. He was hoping to
wow.
live on 40, 50,000 a year because that's what he was earning, right? At that time, back in the early 2000s. Well, that's not you're not going to be living on that if that you're trying to save 10, 20% of your income. It's just not enough.
Mm,
And that's when I realized that's why I had to leave the industry. I realized if I want to keep my integrity intact, I can't teach something that I know works for really only about 2% of people
Yeah.
legitimately, according to Fidelity's numbers. And even then, of that 2%, 35% that were surveyed by Transamerica thinks it'll be a miracle for them to be able to retire. So they don't even believe they can retire. One
Wow.
third of that 2%, right? So that means really 1% of people are confident they're going to be okay.
Yeah, and I think it's only going to get worse. That was kind of the
Mhm.
reason I started the show. Is like I was talking to millennial friends of mine, and I was just like, it's going to
Yeah.
be worse for us than it was for our parents because
Oh, yeah.
just because of the rate of inflation where it is right now, like our money is getting so severely impacted by inflation.
Mhm.
And when you look at things like that are the safety nets, like Social Security and things, like they're estimating Social Security is going to be bankrupt by like 2034 or something like that
Right.
if it continues along this path. It's like there's not going to be a lot of safety nets for us. We're not a part of the 40-40-40 plan like it was a generation ago, where it's like you work somewhere 40 hours a week for 40 years, you can retire for 40% of your income from the pension.
Right.
Like companies are firing people, there's turnover all the time. You don't have the 401k match. Like if you want to be able to stop working, it will be up to you to learn how to earn more income. Like we're not going to be able to
That's right.
save our way to retirement. We're going to have to earn our way to retirement.
Bingo.
And you do that by learning more skills, getting more information, and listening to stuff like this. Like this is mind blowing stuff because you look at it and you think it really is that simple. $100 a month for 40 years, you retire a millionaire, and it's like, okay, sure, but like you said, $1 million in 40 years from now, even if it was a million, is not going to be worth that much money. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like people's starting salaries in 40 years from now is going to be like $700,000. You know what I mean? Like coming out of college, like just to be able to pay the bills. The
That's the
dollar is
thing.
going to
People
be
think that's
impacted.
crazy, but it's reality. I mean, how many? I
Yeah.
mean, I remember back in the '80s, I thought a million, like someone who had $1 million would have their own personal butler,
Yeah. Right.
live-in maid, right?
Right.
Like you're a millionaire, you have that stuff. That's yeah. Now you're just middle class
Yeah.
if you have $1 million in net worth.
Yeah. Right. It's like 40 years is a long time, man.
Yeah.
A lot happens in that time period. That's why, people were buying houses. Sure, the interest rate was 14%, but it's like, yeah, but the house was 52,000.
Yeah.
So it's like, it wasn't that big of a deal to pay the interest on that. Now it's like, oh, the house is 780,000 and the interest is 7%. It's like that is a much more difficult payment to be able to make. Like you can't even afford to buy a personal residence anymore. So how are you gonna you don't even have that as this like as the backup plan like our generation
Yeah.
ago did. You know what I mean? Like that's why we started the show is like millennials. I think my generation is going to probably feel it the most because I think Gen Z already knows. Like they're
Mhm.
aware that this is not a good plan. You know what I mean? They didn't get the lie sold to them that if you go to college and put yourself in debt, you're going to get a good job and things are going to be okay. It's like millennials are starting to figure out that that's not how it works. I think
Yep.
Gen Z is going to be raised knowing that it is not going to work, and they're going to have other options. But the people that are going to be impacted the most are the people in their 30s and 40s right now, who are midway through a bad plan
Hmm.
that's going to lead to nowhere.
That's it. You're right. I mean, we're playing by old rules, aren't we? I mean,
Yeah.
think of like my dad. He was of the generation. He was born right during World War II. He was like at the forefront of the baby boomers, and he was still believing that a company would be loyal to you, that they
Hmm.
would
Hmm.
give you that pension. But by that point, when he was starting to get towards retirement, pensions were gone, and not to mention he got laid off. There was times they would lay him off. He'd have to go to the next company, and
Yep.
yeah, he was lucky enough to find a job because he was good at what he did. But he realized that 40 40 40 wasn't going to happen for him, right?
Yeah.
And people still play by those rules today. And even like you said, there's people even play by the rules of the 4% rule. You ever heard of that? Like, whatever you save up in your mutual funds, you save up $1 million, you could live on 4% or 40,000 a year.
Mm.
Did you know that the guy that came up with that, he actually got those figures from 1926 to 1976.
Oh
He was
my
looking at the stock
gosh.
market. This is now almost 50 years ago when it ended, right? He was looking at that study. Well, think about what happened that meantime. Since 1976, we live longer, so
Yeah.
therefore you have to stretch out the dollars more.
Yep.
And then two, 1974 is when Nixon took us off the gold standard.
Mm.
Inflation is higher than it was when we were on a gold standard. And so with higher inflation, longer living, that 4% rule is now changed to a 3% rule if you're in your 60s. And this is like I met with one of my friends and he's been awesome. He's made great money in business. He's saved up over $1 million in his mutual funds and mostly the spider fund, right? And I actually agree, like doing that versus the mutual funds that a financial advisor will give you, you'll probably make more money than even hiring a financial advisor. Well, he was stuffing money and he's like, I now got over $1 million. He's like, Chris, I'm financially free. I don't have to keep working anymore. And I said, really? He's like, yeah, I've got over $1 million and I can live on 4%. I said, well, you know, that 4% rule was debunked years ago. We were questioning it 20 years ago as financial advisors. He's like, what? I was like, yeah, like for you at 30 years old, because I mean, I was like, what you've done is incredible, by the way,
Yeah.
but it's a 2% rule at most for you right now. If you want your
Yeah.
money to last, guaranteed, if you're going to keep it in the market like that. He's like, wait, you say I have to double the money I saved? I'm like, yeah. No, I don't want to believe it. I'm like, you don't have to, but you're
Yeah.
playing by old rules, right?
Right.
Like that's not the way the reality is anymore. And he'll keep working, which is great. Like keep working, keep making that income, keep packing that money away. But you can do so much better than locking it into cruddy little mutual funds that the only person that gets paid consistently, whether you make money or not, is the financial advisors or the financial companies. Even if it's the spider fund, there's still a company that's making fees off of you
Yep.
by doing essentially nothing for you.
So this has been a lot of good news so far, Chris. We've we've
Yeah.
really
And now I've depressed
instilled,
you.
yeah, we've instilled a positive spirit in the mind of the listener. No, there's obviously a lot of negative things, a lot of bad news. And there is a lot of bad news, and
Mhm.
you can't build a plan that's going to work effectively if you don't face the reality of the situation. And we can
Right.
talk, you can talk in circles for hours and hours about who's to blame and this economy, this and this president, that, and it at the end of the day, none of it matters because this is the
Nope.
situation that we're in. This is the hand that we're being dealt. So the question becomes, how do we play the hand effectively? So what do you do? How do you teach people? What should we be thinking about? What should we be doing differently than these old school plans that have been served up to us on a silver platter as absolute truth?
Yeah. So instead of like taking all your hard-earned dollars, from the business, the primary source of income, like you talk about on the show, right? Instead of just taking that and throwing it to a place where you're kind of gambling it, instead of just trying to slave and save, instead try to get that money instead of accumulating, get it to accelerate. And that comes by accumulating, not compounding interest, but compounding income, right?
Hmm.
And so it's really about the here and now. Like I said at the beginning, everybody talks about this future, future day planning in 30, 40 years. But what
Yeah.
about today? So give you an example, like I had a client out in California. He'd retired at 60 from the military, had $1 million in his accounts, in his mutual funds and everything. And so the financial advisor says, okay, well, you're 60 years old. You want to retire? You can live on 3%. So 30,000 a year. He's like, wait a minute. Are you saying I'm a broke millionaire because I'm living below the poverty line as a millionaire? And he said, yeah, pretty much. That's how it works. I don't want that. And so he eventually found our podcast. And then, as we worked with them, we started looking at what are the different things you can do with this money instead of like letting it sit in the stock market where it could be crashing at any moment, which by the way, we're starting to see that even recently. Instead of doing that, instead say, what if we got this into things that generate income right now? So, like, for example, buying a rental, but not a rental he has to manage, right? Nothing that takes up your time and energy. He has a property manager that does it for him. So, he had a couple like duplexes that he bought that somebody else manages. He
Hmm.
also got that money invested in like oil and gas, where again, they're doing all the work. He's just a partner in it, a finance
Hmm.
partner, right? Then he even did some things with apartment complexes. And again, was a partner in that where he wasn't doing any of the work. He was just financing and putting the money in. So essentially, he was letting his money do the work for him. Well, with that being said, that $1 million is now generating over $100,000 a year.
Hmm.
Same money, but now it's generating income, actual
Yeah.
real income, not even touching the $1 million, just making income off that money. And that's the big difference. That's what shocked me. Like when I first realized this, as I was quitting being a financial advisor, when somebody said, "Hey, listen, did you know you can lend out your money to a real estate investor, not an agent, but
Yeah.
to an investor? Did you know you can lend money to an investor and make like 1% a month?"
Yeah. Yeah.
And remember, I was thinking from that 3% rule even back then, and I was like, "Wait a minute, that 100,000 is not producing 3,000 a year. Now that 100,000 producing 1% a month, that's $1,000 a month or $12,000 a year. That's quadruple the income that they'd be doing by putting their money in mutual funds."
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so much better. In fact, there's hope. I even thought about my dad's like, maybe there could be hope for him. Maybe there's something he could be doing too, right? Even though he was really locked into that, traditional mainstream mentality.
Yeah.
And so that's where the real difference happened is like, wait a minute, I can get this money to produce income right now while still let my golden goose keep laying those fatter golden eggs.
Yeah. So are you now looking more at like real estate for cash flow, or is there do you buy any do you do any like private equity deals? Are you looking at buying into businesses that are cash flowing? What's your primary way of increasing that income?
It could be any of the above. Yeah. I mean, definitely alternative investments. That's what we were talking about, right? Main Street investing versus Wall Street, which is all the stocks and bonds and stuff.
Yeah.
Now, that being said, I mean, most of the time with our clients, we're usually doing something that's backed by real estate, but there could be like, it could be a car wash business, right? Going in
Mm.
and go into a car wash business that then, is creating a cash cow out of it. Um, for a time, not anymore. The last few years, I told people stay away from ATM funds where you can literally own an ATM machine and get paid from the fees.
Yeah.
And you get business write-offs and everything. And now those things are tanking, right? Because, if we eventually go crypto, what do we need an ATM for anyway, right?
Right.
So those kind of things, right? But yeah, I mean, like definitely business can, I mean, there's franchises, there's all kinds of models you can do. You can go into, it could be private equity. Again, be careful, of course, because I'm more of the opinion, like if I'm going to invest in anybody's business, it will be my own,
Yeah. Yeah.
or a business that somehow I can almost Warren Buffett it a little bit. And when I say that, like Warren Buffett, people think he buys stocks, and that's just not the case. Warren Buffett buys into a partnership, but Warren
Yep.
Buffett goes in and says, I want to make sure my team can go into this company. I have a controlling interest to where I can ensure my investment. I want to make sure that I'm on the board helping to make decisions. I want to
Yep.
make sure that I can ensure my investment against loss,
But you can
against
impact
bad.
revenue.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And that's
Yeah.
what PE is really. I mean, if you think about it, he is a
Sure.
PE investor, right? He's doing
Hmm.
private equity. He's just doing it with stocks that are publicly traded, of course.
Hmm.
But you can do the same thing with smaller businesses, just depending on what level of interest you want to have in it. Now, if you want to be hands-off, passive investor, well, then yeah, you got to make sure whoever you're investing with is solid. You got to bet on the jockey even more so than the horse. So that's
Yes.
one thing you got to be aware of.
Yeah, the bottom line is there's going to be risk everywhere.
Hmm.
Investing is the name of the game is risk, whether it's stocks, bonds, crypto, real estate, private equity, it doesn't matter. You're
Yeah,
taking your hard-earned dollars and you're putting them to work somewhere. You are taking a risk by departing with those dollars in
right.
some capacity. So get to know your risk profile, but also start asking yourself some of these questions. Like, what are some areas that maybe I would be able to, like, if you have a job as an accountant or something like that, then look at businesses that you would be able to impact by cleaning up financials and help them with their books. And you can own a percentage of the business by simply offering some of your time and putting a little bit of money back into the business. And like, what do you do? What do you know? What's your expertise? Do you have connections in this field? How can I put money into things that are actually going to pay me money now?
Right.
I like the definition of wealthy that Scott Galloway gives, which is wealthy is basically just when you have passive income that's greater than your burn.
Hmm.
He's like, I know people that make 1.5 million a year in management consulting and things like that, but they spend 1.5 million a year at their, with their penthouse and their au pairs and nannies and their private school education for their kids and their, vacation in the Hamptons and all these like crazy things. It's like, well, that person is just as broke as somebody making 50 grand a year spending 55. It doesn't
True.
matter. Your goal is to be able to take your hard-earned money that you trade your time to earn, and then put that money to work so that money is working for you to make more money while you're not having to take your time to earn that money. But whatever it is, like passive income at the end of the day is still a myth to me. Like there's no such thing as 100% passive income. Now things can get much, much, much more passive the better you get at doing them. Absolutely. But nothing's ever going to be 100% passive. And you think it is, that's when you're going to get taken advantage of. Because that's when you just
Right.
like, you don't want to do any work. You just want to write a check. Well, that sounds really nice, but that's how you get raked over the coals because you're investing in something that you have no idea about. You have no knowledge in that vertical and you have no business investing in that thing. So you write a check and hope that they do something good with it, but you're taking a very, very big risk by doing so. Where if you would just maybe just get to know that thing for a little bit. Like I know you were on BiggerPockets, right? They talk a lot about real estate. It's like BiggerPockets has a ton of resources on investing in real estate. If that's a vertical that interests you and you want to put some money into a single family home, or do you want to do some house hacking or you want to buy a duplex, great. That's awesome. Start
That's
learning
not
about
passive.
real estate. You know what I mean? Start there.
Yeah,
Learn something first because it's going to require a little bit of work. And then eventually it can become passive. But at the beginning, it's not going to be.
that's true. It's going to be either you're going to invest energy or money.
Right.
Sometimes both, depending on what you're going into. Like it's essentially the bigger pockets because now they've created a passive pockets branch for more like things I teach about, right?
Oh, really?
Because bigger pockets has always been like how to essentially, like you said, do the burst strategy where you help buy the house, you rehab it, rent it out, and all that kind of stuff, right? or they do flips or
Mhm.
wholesaling or whatever, but that's anything but passive. Those are like legitimately businesses that you're starting
Right.
up.
Right.
You know, the only way to be more passive, and you're right, like even then, the only way to be more passive is you have the cash, the capital that you're earning from your business or your job or whatever you're doing, taking that and then put it with those that are doing the work. But
Mhm.
even then, there's an element of stewardship. You got to make
Yes.
sure that you're like doing that due diligence up front. Make sure you're understanding them. How are they as operators? Are they solid? What are they doing? I'll give you an example of one guy that did this, and he went a little bit on the semi-passive route just because he wanted to insure his investment more. Is he was a passive investor by putting his money in oil and gas stuff, and this was a small group that he was working with. But he realized pretty quickly. He said, I can tell these guys they're not good at running the company. Some of these guys are accountants, some of these guys are drillers, and they don't know how to speak the same language.
Mm.
He's like, but I have business experience. So he said, I'm going to self-appoint really, well, self-appoint myself. That's a little
Yeah.
redundant. I'm going to appoint myself as a fractional CEO of your company. He's like, I will make sure I'll even give you more money just to invest, but
Yeah.
I want to be a fractional CEO where you pay me $1,000 a month, and I'm going to make sure you guys talk together so that there's smooth operations. The only reason he wanted to do that is because he wanted to make sure his investment money came back. He wanted a
Yeah. Yeah.
return of his money, just not a return on it.
Smart.
So he almost double dipped. Like he was getting investment returns from the oil drilling and stuff, but then he was also getting paid this guaranteed salary
Yeah.
for using his talents. And I think that's a great way to go. I mean, that's not passive. That's semi quasi passive, but it's a great example. Like if you're ever worried about